So I think that he has changed. He's changed the endings of the stories. And welcome back to the Sundowners Club. I'm your host, Sean. To my right, my buddy Sterling. What's up, man?
Not much. How are you?
I'm doing good, doing good. So we're going to do a little bit of prediction today. We're going to be talking about, after the finale of House of the Dragon, which to me, best show on TV, best show in a while that I've seen. I put it right up there as a singular season, season one, with some of the best seasons of the shows that I've watched in the past. The Breaking Bads, Game of Thrones, obviously. A little bit of Sopranos. There's some other shows that I've really liked as well, but House of the Dragon was phenomenal, and it leads us into the rumor mill around the Jon Snow series. So, got a few thoughts around that. There's some things that are on the web. If you look at the interviews that George R.R. Martin has done, some of the actors from Game of Thrones, Emilia Clarke, we'll talk about. We'll talk about Macy Williams, and just what to expect from the show, what we think is going to happen. And then I want to talk about a key thing that I believe is going to allow them to do a little bit of retcon. That we talk about retconning in the Star Wars universe and other stories, but I think this one has a chance to really be retconned, and I'll talk about why. But first, as we come out of House of the Dragon, we know that the Jon Snow series is in pre-production at HBO. George R.R. Martin just recently gave an interview where he confirmed that they're in the third draft of the script. So depending upon how well it's written, that's pretty far along, I think. Who knows how many iterations of the draft they'll have. But the question is, first of all, will it come out before House of the Dragon Season 2? No way. No way that's going to happen for a variety of reasons, right? We know that House of the Dragon is going to start back production early 2023. They should wrap by summertime. It may trickle into June and July of this upcoming summer, which makes me think, if you think about the traditional Game of Thrones releases, they would come out usually around April. So I think we're not going to get House of the Dragon in 2023, but we could get it in early 2024, somewhere between January to April. I don't think we'll have to go farther than April before Season 2 hits. And with the pre-production on Jon Snow, they haven't even done casting yet. I think that's not going to happen. And I also think it's not going to happen because they want the focus on House of the Dragon. They've got like a 4-season arc, maybe longer, but they want to get House of the Dragon at least a few seasons under their belt and before they launch Jon Snow. That being said, if you look at what, knowing that Kit Harington is behind the creation of the show, brought it to HBO supposedly, he's going to get producer title. He's going to have some control over the show, and sounds like he's got the blessing of George R.R. Martin from the interviews that George has given. We know other shows have been in development. I question whether they're going to do the Thousand Ships, and they're going to do Dunk and Egg. There's other shows that I don't know are ever going to get off the ground because I think HBO is going to be smart about it. But I think Jon Snow, it's a gold mine because we do know that it takes place after the events of Game of Thrones. And so, first of all, do you want to see a story that takes place after the events of Season 8 of Game of Thrones? That's the first question. Yeah. Probably the most important one.
Absolutely. I think most people do. But people have high expectations. They want that to fix the last season of Game of Thrones, and I don't know if he'll do that. But I think absolutely I want to see it. I think most people are expecting it to fix everything that was wrong with the last season. I don't know if he'll do that, but
well, I think people are pretty excited based on House of the Dragon. So they've got the fans back. If you look at the numbers, they're off the charts. You can't just look at the streaming through HBO Max to get the true numbers for House of the Dragon because people are still going on your traditional cable and watching it on HBO through their satellite providers and their cable providers. And so you have to factor in those numbers in addition to the streaming numbers. So when you look at something on Disney Plus or Netflix or Amazon, they don't have the traditional cable channel like HBO does. So when you combine all that, House of the Dragon is a massive hit. And I don't see anything happening to it but going up as we introduce new characters next year. But I think what's going to happen with Game of Thrones / the Jon Snow series is they can't go back and change what happened in season 7 and season 8. But what they can do is tell a story where they say that was not the end. You thought that this was the prince who was promised. You thought that this was the end of the defeating the White Walkers and the Night King. But knowing that the Night King is not even in the books, and knowing that we now know the House of the Dragon has dropped several hints about the prince who was promised. And so it seems like they're laying the groundwork. If Jon Snow really is the prince who was promised, and we now know he's Aegon Targaryen, and all we're seeing in House of Dragon is Aegon Targaryens, that I think they're setting it up for the story to be told beyond what season 8, what we thought was the ending. So they won't go back and change what happened in season 8, but I think that there can be a continuation of the story to say this is the real prince who was promised, defeating the threat beyond the wall in winter. And that may not include the Night King that we saw. We may see another version of the Night King. You and I have talked about that where we thought that the Night's King came from, which was the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, which went by Brandon Stark. So there's lots of things that have been talked about in fandom around where the story could go. And you look at Macy Williams making the comments about never say never. You know they're going to want to bring Arya Stark back in some form or fashion in the Jon Snow series. You see Emilia Clarke saying that, yes, she spoke to Kit Harington. He already talked to her, and so she knew that he was heading up the series. And so that's a little strange. We know that they're friendly with each other and that she's friends with his wife, but the fact that he talked to her about it, there's breadcrumbs, at least for the potential to say, look, we never saw Daenerys's, we saw her body flown off, and we had hints that she was brought to Volantis, and we know that's where the Red Priestesses were, and we know that people get brought back from the dead in Game of Thrones, which is why Jon Snow is even coming back for a series. So what do you think about the prospects of bringing back some characters, maybe someone like Daenerys who was thought to be dead, bringing back Drogon, bringing back maybe Arya in the wider story?
Right. I think whenever they mention that prophecy in House of the Dragon, it makes you disappointed in how that show ended, because Jon Snow really didn't do anything as far as, I mean, he did, but it wasn't. He didn't. I guess he united people, but he wasn't the one that killed the Night King. So I mean,
but did he beat back the Winter and Beyond the Wall? He didn't defeat the Night King.
He didn't. So
he certainly didn't unite the kingdom. I mean, he killed Daenerys.
Yeah. So
but we don't even know if that united the kingdom. We know that Bran, who to me is, if you really peel back the onion, Bran might be the villain of the story. Bran knew early on when he started having visions how the whole thing was going to play out. And now he sits on the throne. He could have told everybody, hey, by the way, when this all ends, I'm going to be the king. But he didn't do that. So nothing that's been said about the prophecy in House of the Dragon has really come true, unless I'm just completely misunderstanding the storyline. But if we know that Jon Snow is the prince who was promised, I think that they're laying the groundwork as part of this wider universal world that the world building that they've done, to say, hey, this is not over. So you may not like the way season 7, season 8 ended, but 5, 6, 7 years later, when we relaunch Jon Snow, there's a chance to tell this story and tell it the way it was meant to be told. We also don't have the final 2 books from George R.R. Martin, so we don't know. There was always this thought that the end of season 8 was the end of the story that would tie in with the end of his books, Dream of Spring. We don't know that.
Right.
Like we don't know. And I have a feeling George has, my guess of what I think has happened is George got disenchanted after season 5. Benioff and Weiss were going in a different direction. He wanted certain things put into the show that weren't for reasons of, television, whether that's right or wrong. So for whatever reason, he backed away, and then they wrapped up. So now he's got 2 books he can deliver. And I really think he's got Winds of Winter basically done. I think it's a timing thing. I don't buy that it's 75% done.
I don't know about that.
I think he's basically got it done, and they're being strategic about when they're going to release it. And It's going to be about 1,500 pages long, according to George. So I think that he has changed. He's changed the endings of the stories. I really believe he's changed the endings.
Think the ending could be what's in the actual Jon Snow show? Like they use that to accurately.
Well, he's going to have more of a hand in where that story goes and control.
Right.
So we know in House of the Dragon, he's got a very good relationship with Ryan Condal, and he's very happy with where House of the Dragon has gone. And I think he has certain people he trusts. And I think at some point, whatever was going on with HBO and AT&T at the time, and Richard Plepler stepping down and Casey Bloys coming in, you know, I'm not blaming Casey Bloys for that because I think he has a good relationship with George, but there were a lot of changes, and so for whatever reason, without blaming anybody, George stepped out after season 5. That was clear, and he said things in interviews that led you to believe that. Now he seems to be all in again. You see him talking. He's talking about the Rise of the Dragon book that has the colorful artwork in it, the Fire and Blood books that they're selling, and where the show's going. He seems excited for that again. And I think the Jon Snow series, his favorite character is Tyrion. So it makes you wonder, is Tyrion going to come back? But I do think that we're seeing breadcrumbs from some of the actors. And I do think that without reading too much into it, the fact that he talked to Emilia Clarke, told her about the series, I think there's a game plan. Will she agree to come back? She's probably like a lot of other actors. She's got work that she can do. She's got projects, but it's going to be about seeing the material, whether it's in season 1 of Jon Snow, season 2, season 3. At some point, it's about, let me see the script. Let me see the material. If it's done well, why wouldn't she come back? It's the best role she'll ever have in her life. Same with Macy Williams. I mean,
it's the same for any of them.
They're never going to have roles as good as that. So,
and they're great actors. It's just I agree. It's going to be hard for any of them to ever have a role that was as big as what they had in that show.
Yeah, and I think it's too much of a gold mine. House of the Dragon's proven that. I don't know that they're going to launch a bunch of different shows.
I think they will.
We could see the Blackfire Rebellion. That's a really good story. Potential Dunk and Egg could be good.
Well, look at it from a business standpoint, though. So all these companies have their own streaming services.
But do we need to see a whole series on the Sea Snake?
It won't matter. Well, I don't know about that, but
so that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of ancillary characters you don't need to see much from.
Like Netflix has, they've got Stranger Things and The Witcher, and then Disney has Marvel and Star Wars, and HBO wants to be a major streaming service competitor. In order to do that, they need a franchise. And that franchise for them is Game of Thrones. So, I mean, I see them. It might not be. There's tons of things they'll probably pitch, and there's maybe only a few they will do.
Right.
But I see them milking Game of Thrones the same way Disney's milking Star Wars. I think it could go on for years.
Animated books, games,
all kind of stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because that's I guess I don't know if they own the IP or if they just have a deal with George R.R. Martin, but that's kind of their golden goose right now, and HBO needs that to be a major player. So I don't.
When did the final season of Game of Thrones aired in 2019? Right? Was it 19? I think it was.
Remember.
So they were filming in 2018, maybe the final season.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
By the time we get to the Jon Snow series, it'll have been 6 years. That's a good amount of time to see where your career is going or where it's not going, to be able to look at the story and say, you know what, they want me back. This is,
yeah.
I mean, look, by the way, those top characters, the actors that were playing the roles, they were making a lot of money by the end. I don't know what I know at some point I read $250,000 per episode, but they may have gotten higher than that.
Done a whole lot since then. I mean, Emilia Clarke had she was in the Star Wars movie, and I think she's going to be in Secret Invasion.
She's in Secret Invasion.
So she's probably had one of the better careers, but Kit Harington was in Eternals, which I don't think did really well.
No.
Then what's it? Peter Dinklage. He's been in a few things, but
Serrano and Amelia had Last Christmas, Solo. I think Solo was in the can before Game of Thrones was finished filming, and she's going to be in Secret Invasion. That'll be a good project.
I think them being in that show will be probably the biggest thing they've done since Game of Thrones. So I think actors kind of have this thing where, like, their ego, they don't want to be known just for that one role, but
That's why it takes time. It takes time to go out and do other projects, and whether it be theater, film, television, streaming, whatever, do the things that they enjoy. Have some time to back away from the fame and from the intensity of it. Let a new cast come in, like with House of the Dragon. Let
Right.
them go through that process, and then you can step back into it, like the actors did at Star Wars, and people have done in other projects where they take time and then they come back and they say, you know what, I appreciate this more. Like this is, I'm not taking this for granted. I'm enjoying this, and so I think my gut tells me that it's going to be a retcon in a traditional sense of that this was not the end, and we're now going to tell the story. I believe that is
I
going to
hope
happen.
so. I think everybody hopes.
If you think about it, just logically,
Yeah.
if you don't do that, why are you covering Jon Snow Beyond the Wall? It's just logical. That's going to happen. And look no further than the interviews with the actors that played in Game of Thrones. Some of the breadcrumbs I said have been left. What George R. R. Martin has said. And then also look at the fact that in the House of the Dragon, they referenced the prince who was promised multiple times.
Right.
And
Seems like they're setting it up.
they're setting it up, and I don't think any of that is by chance. So I believe that's going to happen. Looking at the logistics of it, I think we're looking at 2025 before we see Jon Snow. I don't see any way that it happens before, because 2024 we're going to have House of the Dragon season 2, and so the earliest I think we could see Jon Snow would be 2025.
They could try to have multiple Game of Thrones shows though in the same year.
They could.
I mean, it's a streaming service, so they want subscribers. And so that wouldn't surprise me if they released it in the same year, honestly.
But we will we'll definitely, as we get more casting news and official announcements from HBO, we'll be there to cover it, and we will also be there to cover the season 2 of House of the Dragon. So, wanted to talk about that today with our predictions. Again, I'm on record. I think they're going to retcon it. I think the groundwork has been laid. I think they're going to bring back some other characters, not just Kit Harington, but they're going to wait to let those things leak out. Some of those may be surprises. Some will be announced before. You'll have Tormund and some other people that I think they'll announce before the show starts. But we'll be there to cover it. If you like what you saw and heard today, leave a comment below, hit the subscribe button, and we thank you, and TCB.